Jasmine Kaur was born on September 14, 1999, in India and was the first child of a woman named Rajpul Kaur. It should be clarified that the word Kaur means princess. Kaur is often used as a middle name, but for the heroines of today's story, it was a surname. It is known that Rajpul gave birth to twin sons Gurman and Sukmo after Jasmine. The children's father died when the girl was only 6 years old, and the family took this loss hard. In 2017, 18-year-old Jasmine decided to go to Australia in search of new opportunities. She knew her relatives lived there. Uncle Sam Bordua, who lived in Adelaide with his wife Ramandi and their daughter, welcomed his niece, and Jasmine settled with them. The girl, drawn to medicine and the desire to help people, set out to study in South Australia. After passing the exams, she enrolled as a nurse. To somehow help the family that hosted her, Jasmine volunteered to cook for them, and it should be noted that she mastered this task perfectly. But that wasn't all. Her aunt and cousin admired her ability to dress tastefully, which she politely taught her relatives. Additionally, Jasmine proved to be a talented fashion connoisseur and readily shared her knowledge. Despite her young age, she established herself as a reliable, responsible, and conscientious young woman. The excellent upbringing and education her parents gave her complemented Jasmine's kindness, making her a role model for those around her. The girl was very attached to her mother and missed her a lot, calling her and other close relatives every day to tell them how she lived and what she did. Before starting her medical studies, Jasmine decided to gain practical experience by working in a nursing home in a suburb of Adelaide. It is believed that her fate crossed with Tariq Sin there. Tariq Jat was born in 1999 in a village in the Indian state of Punjab and was the firstborn of his parents. After some time, the second child, Singhan, was born. The children's father worked as a farmer on a small plot of land where the family lived. The mother managed the household and took care of the children. Tariq Jat's childhood was bleak and hopeless. The house always had a bad atmosphere because Singh Makan was excessively cruel, preferring to resolve conflicts with violence, and his sons grew up in fear of their own father. Mama was a kind of refuge for them. She knew how to calm and comfort them. Additionally, the brothers loved their maternal grandparents very much, where they always felt safe. Tariq J's mother noticed the boy's immense kindness and sincerity. His mere presence lifted everyone's spirits. At school, he also proved to be an exemplary student, striving for new knowledge. When it was time for him to decide on further education, as is customary in India, he proved to everyone with top grades that he was on the right path and had a promising career ahead of him. In 2016, when Tariq Jat graduated from school, his grandparents managed to gather a small amount for their grandson and helped him move to Australia. The guy had long been drawn to Australia, and he finally got the wonderful opportunity to live in charming Adelaide. Like many young people at the time, he successfully passed the standard English test, a prerequisite for admission to the University of South Australia, and was accepted as a student. Tariq Jat had many directions and research fields open to him. After some consideration, he decided on information technology and aimed for a bachelor's degree. At the same time, he had to work to support himself. For Tariq J, this was no problem. He tried various places, most of which were related to elderly care. Colleagues loved and respected him, and employers appreciated his honesty and kindness, certainly leaving positive reviews and recommendations for Tariq J. He continued to work hard, and it soon became clear that compassion and helping the disadvantaged and unfortunate were his true calling. Over time, Tariq Jat's situation improved. He saved some money and moved into a separate apartment in a suburb of the city, where he lived with another young man, with whom he quickly became friends. When Tariq Jot and Jasmine first met in 2018, the latter had already achieved considerable success in her profession. Colleagues praised her boundless dedication and optimism. The employer was thrilled with this sweet, kind-hearted girl. It's no surprise that Tariq J, who was loved for the same qualities, quickly became close to Jasmine. As they communicated at work and participated in group events together, they began to become friends. Soon, their business relationship developed into a romantic one. And by April 2020, they were already a couple in love. Tariq Jot never hid his true intentions, now openly declaring that he saw Jasmine as the one with whom he wanted to build a life and a strong family. However, over time, he developed a certain insecurity. Tariq J began to doubt Jasmine's actions and motives. Jealousy gripped him, and he began demanding detailed reports from her on where she was and with whom she communicated. The guy tried to control her every step, and if she planned to meet friends after work. He immediately became angry. Constant calls and unfair accusations became part of his behavior. One day, the young man demanded that Jasmine leave her friends and come home immediately. For the girl, such a life became unbearable. She couldn't stand it and shared her experiences with her mother. When her mother heard about the total control from her daughter's boyfriend, she naturally disapproved of the relationship. Tariq Jot didn't care about the interference of others. He was completely absorbed in his own world, wanting to be sure that his beloved would be with him all his life. In October 2020, Tariq J bought engagement rings and proposed to Jasmine. Despite their disagreements and ignoring obvious signs, the girl agreed to become his wife. The engagement didn't calm Tariq J but only increased his suspicions. Now, he used every free minute to appear at Jasmine's workplace unannounced, always with the goal of keeping an eye on her. After experiencing the euphoria triggered by the engagement, the girl began to reconsider the groom's behavior. Doubts overwhelmed her, and the thought of ending the relationship increasingly occupied Jasmine's mind. Eventually, she realized that the connection with Tariq J had negative effects on her mental and emotional health. After careful consideration on January 4, 2021, she told him that they should break up. In response, she heard angry threats and words from the man that he would take his own life if she left him. The next day, when Jasmine finished work, she noticed from the window that Tariq J was watching her. During a break, she went out to talk to him, and the guy once again begged her to stay, but she remained steadfast in her decision. Then, Tariq J once again threatened to harm himself, saying that she would be responsible for whatever happened to him. That same evening, Jasmine learned that Tariq J had taken a large number of sleeping pills. She never took his words seriously and didn't believe he was capable of it. Worried, the girl urgently contacted his roommate. A friend came and took Tariq J to the hospital, where he wrote a statement claiming he had tried to take his own life but took no responsibility for the decision. He blamed Jasmine's family for the breakup and suggested that her relatives had influenced her decision to leave him. The next morning, on January 6, 2021, a psychiatrist examined the man. The specialist found no signs of mental illness in the patient and concluded that the overdose was most likely due to the inability to cope with the breakup. Tariq J was discharged, but only a few hours later, Jasmine's ex-fiancé suddenly appeared at her place, insisting that she go with him to talk about something important. His real goal was to persuade the girl to resume the relationship. This attempt failed again as Jasmine refused. The guy was very angry and wanted her to pay for his suffering. In a desperate attempt to win back his beloved, he threatened to make their intimate videos public. Tariq J knew exactly that this would be unbearable for Jasmine's devout family. The trick didn't have the desired effect, and in the face of the girl's indifference, Tariq J sent the video to her mother. A few minutes later, Raj Pool, shocked, contacted her daughter, who was understandably also furious about the whole situation. The next day, the jealous man came to Jasmine's workplace. He stood next to his car, patiently waiting for her to finish her shift. Although the girl ignored him and simply walked away, he didn't give up. This time, Tariq J slowly followed her in his car, then suddenly gave up the chase, allowing her to reach home unhindered. However, the mentally exhausted Jasmine couldn't sleep properly that night. The pressure from Tariq J increased day by day, and each time he threatened to share the intimate videos with more people if Jasmine didn't come back to him immediately. January 28, 2021, became critical for the girl. Unable to bear it any longer, she officially reported her ex-fiancé for harassment to the police. Every detail of their relationship was recorded from beginning to end. Due to the severity of the matter, police officers launched an investigation and met with Tariq J on February 9 to clarify what had happened. The man received a warning for his unacceptable behavior. It is noteworthy that by this time, Tariq J had already developed a habit of writing text messages containing insults and bullying. Although most of these messages were never sent to Jasmine, they clearly showed the extent of his obsession. A few days later, the young man again tried to take his own life but was timely discovered by his roommate. When asked in the hospital why he did such a thing, Tariq J said he couldn't survive the breakup and begged not to be admitted to the hospital. Amazingly, they listened to him and released him under medical supervision. A few days later, the man began taking medication prescribed by doctors because he was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and restlessness. However, at the same time, thoughts about harming Jasmine became more intrusive. With careful concentration, Tariq J began to develop his terrible plan. On March 4, 2021, he managed to get a map showing the locations of almost all surveillance cameras in Adelaide. The next day, he inserted his SIM card into another phone and left it at home to create an alibi. To avoid being filmed by cameras or noticed by acquaintances, the man also borrowed his neighbor's car, a blue Jeep. That same day, Tariq J bought gloves, cable ties, tape, and a shovel at a hardware store. The only thing he didn't account for was that every move he made was recorded by the store's surveillance cameras. He then drove to Jasmine's workplace, where he waited for her to come out. Around 10 p.m., the girl finished her work and walked out onto the deserted street, completely unaware of what awaited her. Suddenly, Tariq J attacked her, grabbed her by the arms, and dragged her into the car. In the car, he taped Jasmine's mouth and eyes shut, tied her hands and feet, drove to a remote location, and carried his ex-fiancée into the trunk of the car. He then drove north toward the city of Hawker, nearly 400 kilometers from Adelaide. Between 11:30 p.m. and 3:30 a.m., 5 city surveillance cameras recorded the car he was driving several times along the entire route. When Tariq J arrived at a location only he knew, he got out of the car and began digging a shallow grave by the roadside. He then opened the trunk and tried to stab Jasmine in the throat but couldn't cause significant damage. Unable to finish what he started, he let the girl sink into the grave and began to bury her alive. All this happened on the morning of March 6. After burying the grave, Tariq J got into the car, drove off, and discarded Jasmine's belongings along with the remaining cable ties, tape, and other items, including the gloves and balaclava. The place where he disposed of the evidence was known as Death Rock. When her family noticed that Jasmine had not returned home that same day, they began to worry. When the girl didn't show up for work, the employer also became concerned. Their anxiety increased when they found out that the employee's car was still parked in front of the building. Knowing nothing about Jasmine's whereabouts, her relatives contacted the authorities and reported her disappearance. For Detective Bray, who was in charge of the investigation, it was unlikely that the girl had gone somewhere alone or willingly with someone. He was sure she had been taken by force. Bray reviewed the security footage from Jasmine's workplace, believing they would provide a clue. One of the recordings from the previous night showed a particular person. The man loitered near the building and then drove to Hawker for most of the morning. To clearly identify the suspect, the authorities made a public appeal to anyone who might have information about a young man in his early 20s who had been in contact with Jasmine or had been near her in the days leading up to her disappearance. Unfortunately, no one responded. On March 7th, investigators came to Tariq J to talk to him, as a harassment report had previously been filed with the police. Initially, the man denied any involvement in the girl's disappearance. However, he later told the investigator that he and Jasmine had argued, and she had allegedly tried to take her own life. According to Tariq J, he decided, after the bride lost consciousness, that she had died and buried her in a remote location. The next day, the prisoner himself led the police to this horrific grave. When the police dug up Jasmine's body, which was covered with a 30 centimeters layer of sand, they found that her hands were tied behind her back, her legs were tied with a cable, and her eyes and mouth were sealed with tape. The victim's throat was cut, but the wounds were obviously superficial. The body was sent for forensic examination, and a criminal case was immediately opened against Tariq J. The young man was charged with failing to report the girl's death. This charge deprived him of the right to leave his residence. During a more detailed interrogation, serious discrepancies in Tariq J.'s testimony emerged, leading to his arrest. The autopsy report confirmed that Jasmine was still alive at the time of her burial, and the cause of death was lack of air. These findings ultimately shed light on the horrific nature of the events. On March 8, 2021, Tariq J. was charged with murder and placed in a pre-trial detention cell. The man insisted on his innocence, but bail was denied. A few days later, a passerby found Jasmine's belongings near Death Rock. Prosecutors requested a delay of at least 9 months to prepare for the trial against the suspected perpetrator. His first appearance before the Supreme Court was scheduled for March 2022, but Tariq J. fell ill and tested positive for COVID. Instead of the suspect, his lawyer Martin Anders appeared at the hearing, declaring his client not guilty and actively defending him. The trial was postponed. It wasn't until February 6, 2023, that Tariq J. admitted his guilt before the Supreme Court of Adelaide. He openly stated that he had kidnapped Jasmine with the intent to take her life. The man's confession spared the grieving family the ordeal of a lengthy trial, during which very painful issues would have surfaced. At the same time, a sincere confession guaranteed the perpetrator a slightly milder sentence. 5 months later, on July 5, 2023, a judge at the Supreme Court of South Australia sentenced Tariq J. to life imprisonment. In a final attempt to reduce the sentence, the lawyer emphasized the significant impact the breakup had on his client, pointing to Tariq J.'s alleged psychological problems. However, The judge gave no chance to the defense, citing Tariq J's careful planning of all the details of the crime and the calmness with which he executed his horrific act. The sentencing hearing took place on August 1, 2023. After considering various factors such as age, psychological issues, and background, the judge concluded that the non-parole period should exceed 20 years. Tariq J was sentenced to life imprisonment and would be eligible for parole after 22 years and 10 months. Meaning he would be eligible for parole in 2044. In the event of his release, Tariq J would have to leave the country. Before concluding the hearing, the judge explained to Tariq J what his actions meant. He pointed out that as Tariq J took Jasmine's life, he was aware of the monstrosity of his actions and therefore took steps to cover his tracks. He traveled far from the place where he kidnapped the girl to the place where he buried her alive. While driving, he had enough time to reconsider his plan and abandon it. But he decided to proceed. For this reason, the criminal must be behind bars to be held accountable for his heinous act. Rajpool was satisfied with the verdict but said she would never be happy again because she wanted more than anything in the world to be close to her daughter. The inconsolable mother also added that she missed talking to Jasmine every day and continued to wish her a good night every evening, as she had done for almost 20 years. She noted that justice had prevailed and brought her relief. But it was hard to understand that a criminal could be released in just 22 years while she and her family would spend the rest of their lives without their sweet Jasmine. Relatives and friends of the deceased decided to create a unique place in their home to commemorate the girl, never to forget her pure soul and kind heart.
On July 26th at noon, emergency services were called to the Cherwell River. Several calls came in to the police reporting a body floating in the river. After the police officers arrived, the entire area was cordoned off. The police later confirmed that the body was that of a man between his late 20s and early 30s. The police were able to identify the body. It was Jorge Martin Coreno. His relatives were notified 24 hours later. Jorge Martin Coreno was 30 years old and had moved to Oxford from Spain. He was born in Las Pastas de Gran Canaria and moved to the United Kingdom with his girlfriend in 2019. They broke up but remained good friends. The man was an engineer by profession and studied electrical engineering at the university. At the time of his death, he was working at one of the BMW plants. On the evening of his death, he had been drinking with his colleagues and had gone home afterwards. Jorge's family said that he was considerate and kind and always helped others. His curiosity and creativity motivated him to constantly explore, learn, and experiment with new things. He loved music, photography, reading, and sports. He also played the guitar and often visited museums with friends. He had 2 twin brothers. They were triplets. The police had found out the identity of the deceased and were now able to find out what had happened to him that night. Of course, they first looked at surveillance cameras, studied phone data, and eyewitness accounts. A sinister omen was the message from a friend of Jorge's who had sent him a text message a few hours before his death, telling him that Oxford was a dangerous place and sending him an article about an attempted murder. During the investigation, the police found that Jorge was not alone before his death. Several cameras show Jorge walking in the company of a mysterious figure. He and Jorge were recorded from different angles and in different places. The main question was, who was this hooded man? What was he doing with Jorge, and what happened between them? On the evening of July 24, 2021, Jorge went to the city center with his friends. They visited a pub and then went to another pub at 1 o'clock in the morning. Then Jorge received a message from his friend warning him of the dangers of Oxford and sharing an article about an attempted murder. He responded to this message with a smiley emoji. At 2 o'clock in the morning, he said goodbye to his friends. For the next hour, he was with other friends. Then he was alone. At 3:16 a.m., Jorge was standing in Worcester Street and recording the way home on his GPS. 4 minutes later, he was spotted by a camera in Gloucester Street. He called a friend, but unfortunately, he didn't pick up. He continued to search for the way on the GPS. At 3:33 minutes, the footage shows Jorge accidentally dropping his wallet, returning a minute later, picking it up, and walking in a different direction. He seemed to have gotten lost and was trying to find his way using the navigation device. Another camera caught an unknown figure passing by the park at 3:35 a.m. At 3:59 a.m., this man walked down Cat Street. At exactly 4 o'clock in the morning, both men were at the same location. Jorge was sitting on the ground when the unknown man approached him. They talked for about 12 minutes and then walked away together. The cameras show the two of them walking down the street. It was not clear at this point where they were going, but Jorge agreed to go with the unknown man. After that, they walked towards the park. It was very suspicious that Jorge and the stranger were only a few meters from where the man's body was later found. This was already a clue, because until then, everyone had assumed that his death was an accident. The autopsy revealed that he had died of poisoning and drowning. Although he had a blunt force trauma to the head, investigators thought he had fallen, hit his head, and drowned. This didn't make sense. But for 2 years, they believed this accident. Finally, new evidence was found. Forensic scientists found a vodka bottle cap next to the man's body. After examining it, they found the DNA of Jorge and another man on the cap. After watching the surveillance video again, they saw that this stranger was carrying the bottle of alcohol. Then the police had a question. Was Jorge murdered? And if so, why? For a long time, no one knew what had happened to Jorge. His death seemed suspicious, but there was no serious evidence or people who were interested in his death. Soon, the city's residents returned to their normal lives and forgot about the unknown hooded figure. George's family was left without answers. For 2 years, the case remained unsolved, but one day, the police received a strange call. It came from a woman in the U.S. who said her friend, who lived in Oxford, had confessed to the murder of a man. The friend's name was Scarlet Blake. Ashlyn Bell, who lives in the U.S., had a relationship with the 22-year-old Scarlet Blake. She lived on the same street where George's body was found. She and Ashlyn met online and started chatting online. Ashlyn said that Scarlet was interested in death, and the women often talked about killing people and animals. Ashlyn also revealed that Scarlet confessed to killing Jorge and throwing his body into the river. But that's not all. In March 2021, Scarlet's neighbors became concerned because their cat had disappeared. Apparently, Scarlet was responsible for the animal's disappearance, as she took the cat out of the house with food and put it in a cage. She bought a camera, a tripod, and a lighting system, and filmed the cat's murder live on television. She dismembered the cat's body, skinned it, and later ground it up in a blender. By giving information about the murder price, Ashlyn put herself in danger, as she was also involved in it. In addition, the killing of the cat on television was her birthday present to herself. She knew that this information would help to prove that Scarlet was the one who killed Jorge. During the broadcast, Scarlet smiled and said that she wished she could do the same to a human. After that, even stranger things happened. Scarlet began to act like a murdered cat. She frequently meowed in the presence of her friends. She entered her personal information into a national animal database, downloaded it onto a chip, and inserted it into her chest. Ashlyn confirmed that this is exactly what happened, but there was worse. Ashlyn had evidence. Jay was walking down the street with a stranger at 2:30 a.m., a few hours before he died. Scarlet sent Ashlyn a photo of herself wearing the exact jacket she was wearing when she later killed Jorge. She sent this jacket to Ashlyn in the USA. The police seized it for testing. They found traces of Ashlyn's DNA on the jacket. With this information in hand, the police decided to track down Scarlet and eventually arrested her.
During her arrest, she complained that she had no cigarettes and was therefore not in the mood. She didn't want to stop smoking. The police officers told her they had a specialist who could help her overcome her nicotine addiction and offered her nicotine patches. However, she refused, saying that it was not the same as cigarettes. She complained that she felt unwell because of the arrest and was having withdrawal symptoms without cigarettes, but added there are worse things, e.g., genocide. During her arrest, new details of the case came to light. Pictures of a homemade garrote used to strangle a person and a picture with rose petals laid out in the shape of the letter F were found on her cell phone, possibly a reference to Jack the Ripper. A scene from a comic book was found, in which a man talks to a cat while cleaning a crime scene. Another picture showed the starter pack for a date with Scarlet: a knife, a gun, duct tape, and a rope. A fifth picture showed women that Scarlet liked, including 2 of the perpetrators. It turned out that Scarlet had already started planning the murder in January 2021, when she bought a cat trap from an online store. In February, she bought a bottle of vodka. The cap of this bottle was later found by the police near Jorge's body. Even if it wasn't the same cap, this definitely confirms that it was Scarlet's bottle, because she loved this alcohol. In March, Scarlet bought more than 100 bags of cat food. The family that had lost the cat then began to post about the missing pet on social media. By this time, Ashlyn and Scarlet had already been talking about the murder for months. Unfortunately, this continued for several more months. On April 6, 2021, Scarlet bought military boots. Security footage confirms that she was wearing these boots on the night of the murder. In May, she bought a black Macintosh and a handsaw. At 2:30 a.m. on the night of the murder, Scarlet took a picture and sent it to Ashlyn.
Then she went in search of her victim. In the process, she found Jorge. Jorge's family was in shock. On the other hand, they finally learned that Jorge's death was not an accident. Finding out the name of the murderer was a big step forward for them. However, it reminded them once again of their loss, which they had been mourning for 2 years. And now at the trial, they will have to relive this nightmare. Scarlet's trial took place 6 months later. At the trial, she had to defend herself before a judge and 12 jurors. The prosecutor built his case that Scarlet was a sadist who first killed a cat and then a man. Her defense attorney was weaker. He argued that there was not enough evidence for the charge. During the trial, Scarlet stated that she was half cat. It was her alter ego that she always felt. She revealed that this alter ego appears when she is happy. She also explained that she greets her friends with a meow. She has always associated the cat with joy, kindness, and childlike innocence. She confirmed all of this by meowing at the jury. She also said that she didn't know how Jorge died and that she assumed he had drowned. She said she wasn't there. At the trial, a correspondence between Scarlet and Ashlyn was shown, in which they talked about their obsession with violence and death. Scarlet stated in court that she did not want to kill any living being, especially not a human. She also said that it was Ashlyn who forced her to do it. Scarlet justified her behavior with a dissocial personality disorder. The psychiatrist who conducted the tests found her behavior strange, but no mental illness was found in Scarlet. There were also no signs of illness in her past. She denied her guilt in Jorge's murder and said she simply dropped him off in front of the park. She admitted to killing the cat, but added that she did it for Ashlyn. Yes, she said, Ashlyn was also sick, but the responsibility still lay with her. The prosecutor soon found out that Scarlet was influenced by the documentary Hands of Seals. On the video of the live broadcast, the song Unfaith by New Order can be heard, which provided the soundtrack for the film. The prosecutor claimed that Scarlet had taken a murder kit with her on the night of the murder. Not surprisingly, she denied all allegations. It also turned out that a few days after the murder, Scarlet had taken photos of the memorial and the tree at the spot where Jorge had died.
A year later, Scarlet returned to the crime scene and took photos next to the tree. By this time, she had already broken up with Ashlyn and was bragging to her new girlfriend about the murder. 3 possibilities for Jorge's death were considered. He was strangled with a rope or bare hands and lost consciousness before drowning. He was hit on the head, lost consciousness, and drowned. He was held underwater until he stopped breathing. Death could also have been caused by a combination of these factors. However, the bleeding in his head indicates that the death was not accidental. Even if an accident were assumed, the bruises on his right shoulder and left side of his head could only have been caused if he had fallen on his back, hit a reinforced concrete slab, and then tipped over face down. This rules out the possibility of an accidental death. This was bad news for Scarlet. During the trial, she showed no emotion. At the end of the trial, the jury took 2 hours to reach a verdict. They found Scarlet guilty of murder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of applying for parole after 24 years. In addition, she received a 4-month prison sentence for killing the cat, although the sentence does not seem to be much. Parliament has recently increased the maximum penalty for animal cruelty from 6 months to 5 years. However, Scarlet's case was tried before the amendment came into force, so the sentence remained unchanged. George's family expressed relief at the verdict. They then released a statement in memory of Jorge. It said, "Loss has left an indelible wound in their lives. He was robbed of a life full of dreams and new projects." With these words, they not only paid tribute to their son, but also demanded justice. The family asked to continue to fight for justice and to believe in a better future. Every day, they will remember his smile, his laughter, and his zest for life. Jorge had a wonderful sense of humor, was kind, ambitious, and above all, a good person. He traveled from Spain to Oxford to start a new chapter in his life, explore new cultures, and discover new opportunities. On the day he was murdered, he was in the company of friends who loved him when his life was taken. His life was taken to satisfy a twisted fantasy. For his family, his death was a devastating blow. Jorge's death was senseless and tragic. A few hours before, he didn't even know his murderer. We should all be wary of strangers on the street. Most of the time, it's women to whom such stories happen.
But that doesn't mean that men can't be victims too. Thanks for watching, and take care of yourselves.
A quiet residential neighborhood in Charlotte County, Florida. A Sunday evening, like hundreds of others. Neighbors are having dinner, watching television, preparing for the start of a new week. No one suspects that something has happened in one of the houses that could soon shake even the most experienced investigators. At 6 p.m., a call is received by the emergency center. A young voice sounds calm, without a hint of panic. He reports that there has been an accident. The dispatcher's questions evoke no emotion in him. He answers briefly and clearly, as if he were repeating a text already learned. When the police arrive at the scene of the incident, they are greeted by a young man. He is calm, his hands in his pockets, his gaze distant. Inside the house, an eerie scene presents itself. Soon, investigators begin to reconstruct the events of that day, looking for inconsistencies in the young man's story and investigating the family's past. They do not suspect that in investigating the case, they will be confronted with a story that began long before this evening, and that the past has already claimed a victim no one asks about anymore. At first glance, the Griffith family was no different from ordinary American middle-class families. They lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city known for its quiet atmosphere and traditional family values. However, behind the facade of prosperity lay a real drama that would lead to tragic events in the future. Charles Griffith was born on September 12, 1980, in Tulsa. He grew up in an affluent family where strict discipline was particularly observed. His father was in the military, and his mother was an elementary school teacher. From childhood, Charles was taught to strictly adhere to the rules, to be steadfast in his decisions, and not to show feelings. This upbringing was later reflected in his own attitude toward family life. Catherine was born in mid-May 1982 in Jacksonville, Florida. Unlike Charles, she grew up in a friendly, caring family. Her parents, the elderly couple Robert and Linda Moore, had lived their entire lives in the same house in Charlotte County, Florida. Since childhood, Catherine dreamed of becoming a teacher. She loved children and believed in a friendly approach to people. They met in 1999 at the University of Oklahoma. Catherine came from Florida to Oklahoma to study at the Faculty of Educational Sciences. Charles was a student at the business school at that time. He quickly caught her attention. He was self-confident, ambitious, and wonderfully able to court her. In 2001, after 2 years of relationship, they got married. Catherine was 19 and Charles was 21 years old. Shortly after the wedding, she had her first child, Christopher Griffith, on June 1, 2002. The young couple tried to build a new life, but even then, Charles showed signs of despotism. He controlled the finances and demanded unconditional obedience. The birth of their second son, Colin Griffith, on October 14, 2006, was another milestone in their lives. Catherine hoped that this would strengthen the family, but Charles, on the contrary, became even harsher. He viewed his sons as an extension of himself and strove to raise them in a spirit of strict obedience. This was especially true for Colin, who showed cold-bloodedness and a lack of affection from earliest childhood. The first alarm bells rang when Colin was 5 years old. He exhibited unusual behavior, rarely expressed emotions, did not react to punishments, and could stare at someone for a long time without blinking. His father considered this a sign of strength, but Catherine began to notice something frightening about him. In 2020, after almost 19 years of marriage, Catherine could no longer endure her husband's tyranny and officially filed for divorce on August 17, 2020. Charles was awarded sole custody of Colin because the court believed that he was financially stable and able to provide the child with a better future. Since Catherine did not have a well-paying job, she could not convince the judge of her suitability as the custodial mother. Catherine traveled back to Charlotte County, Florida, where she settled near her parents. However, even after the divorce, she did not stop trying to get Colin back. She repeatedly filed lawsuits and tried to get the case reviewed. But Charles always found a way to block her attempts. Meanwhile, Colin, living with his father, withdrew more and more into himself.
This warm, empathetic, and authoritative. This warmth prevents the narrative from sounding cold or sterile. Instead, it provides a sense of reassuring guidance, making the listener trust the storyteller. It should feel like a seasoned journalist or investigator guiding you through complex and unsettling events, maintaining a calm, steady presence that underscores the seriousness and impact of the crime without resorting to melodrama. The speed of the voice should remain the same. At school, he communicated with practically no one, immersed himself in video games, showing no interest in the world around him. At home, he experienced examples of brutal discipline, and any hint of weakness was punished with harsh penalties. Catherine occasionally received messages from him, but there was no warmth or desire for communication. In 2023, 3 years after the divorce, however, she received a message that changed everything. Charles Griffith was found dead, and Colin was arrested on suspicion of murder. This day marked the beginning of a series of events that would shake Charlotte County and lead to a major public outcry. On February 14, 2023, the central office received an emergency call from a young man who said he had shot his father. Colin Griffith spoke in a calm voice and claimed he had acted in self-defense. When asked by the emergency center if medical help was needed, he only answered briefly that his father was dead. The police officers arriving at the crime scene found 16-year-old Colin sitting on the couch in the house. The body of Charles Griffith lay on the floor and had 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest and one to the head. The weapon lay nearby. The fingerprints on it belonged solely to Colin. Life with his father after his parents' divorce was not easy. After the court granted Charles sole custody of his son, he had brought his life completely under control. Any disobedience was interpreted as a challenge and immediately punished. Colin grew up in an environment of brutal discipline, where any expression of feeling was viewed as weakness. He was forbidden to communicate with his mother, to leave the house without permission, and every attempt not to obey ended with threats and the withdrawal of customary amenities. The conflicts between the two became more frequent. Tensions reached a turning point when Colin confessed his orientation to his father. Charles took this as a personal insult, whereupon their relationship finally transitioned into a phase of constant arguments. Colin felt trapped and saw no way out anymore. On that day, according to Colin, his father came home in an agitated state. An argument ensued between the two, which escalated into a physical confrontation. The young man claimed that Charles had threatened him with a knife, whereupon, fearing for his life, he grabbed his father's pistol, which was kept in the house, and fired 2 shots. The initial results of the investigation have, however, already raised doubts among the investigators. Charles had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the head. This suggests that he was likely still alive after the first wound, but was unable to defend himself, and that the second shot was a coup de grace. Colin appeared neither scared nor remorseful. His behavior surprised even experienced investigators. He neither asked for help nor showed fear or panic. When asked for details, he calmly repeated the same version without changing his tone. He did not try to apologize or show fear of possible consequences. Catherine Griffith received the news of her ex-husband's death late in the evening of February 14th when she received a call from the police. Initially, she thought it was a mistake. When she learned that her son was in custody for Charles's murder, she couldn't believe what had happened. Her initial reaction was a mixture of shock and alarm, but relief soon set in. Charles could no longer threaten her, could no longer control Colin, could no longer prevent them from getting back together. This moment of joy, however, was overshadowed by the realization that her son had become a criminal. The investigators were unsure whether the young man's words corresponded to the truth. The opposite could not be proven. The only witness to the incident was Colin himself, and there was no clear evidence of a premeditated crime. The weapon belonged to Charles. There were no signs of a struggle in the house, and Colin himself had no visible injuries. The prosecutor's office accepted the version of self-defense, and a few weeks later, the case was closed. Colin was acquitted. No one suspected that this day was only the beginning of a series of events that would soon lead to an even more terrible tragedy. At the end of March 2023, just over a month after his father's death, Colin Griffith arrived in Florida, in Charlotte County, where his mother, Catherine, lived. Now that full custody had been transferred to her, she hoped to start a new life with her son and create a safe and stable environment for him. The first few months went surprisingly smoothly. Colin began attending a local school, enrolled at the community college, and Catherine did her best to create the appearance of a normal family life. She frequently posted photos with her son on social media, trips to the beach, dinners together, vacations. In the comments, her friends supported her and were happy that she was finally close to her son again. No one suspected that behind these pictures lay a completely different, frightening world. Colin behaved distantly, showed no particular affection for his mother. He rarely spoke to her, showed no gratitude for her care, and preferred to spend most of his time playing video games. He was not interested in his school, and Catherine's attempts to involve him in household chores led to irritation. Initially, she put it down to stress after the events he had experienced, but it soon became clear that the problem lay deeper. After a couple of months, the first warning signs appeared. Colin suddenly snapped when things didn't go the way he wanted.
He wouldn't leave his room, wouldn't respond to his mother's requests, and showed a terrifying indifference in moments of argument. His face remained expressionless, even when Catherine tried to reach him with tears and pleas. In the fall of 2023, the conflict reached its first peak. Catherine tried to limit the time Colin spent playing video games and demanded that he help with household chores and take care of his college. He then became angry, snatched the controller, and threw it against the wall. Then he left the house without a word and did not return for several hours. When he came back, he acted as if nothing had happened. The situation worsened more and more. In November 2023, another serious incident occurred. Catherine tried once again to get her son to do his chores around the house, but Colin suddenly attacked her. He pushed his mother to the floor, grabbed her by the hair, and pressed her to the ground, uttering threats. Colin's grandmother, who was in the house at the time, witnessed the incident. She immediately called the police. When the officers arrived, Colin tried to justify himself, claiming that his mother had attacked him first. His grandmother's statement, however, completely refuted his version of the story. As a result, Colin was arrested for domestic violence. After his arrest, he was sent for a psychiatric evaluation. The doctors found signs of deep-seated behavioral disorders, including a lack of empathy, an inability to feel remorse, and increased aggressiveness. Despite the recommendation of specialists that he needed long-term therapy, Colin was released after a few months and moved back in with his mother. Catherine began to be seriously afraid of her own son. She shared her fears with friends but did not know what to do. On the one hand, he was her child, whom she loved. On the other hand, she felt that he posed a threat to her. At that time, however, she could not yet imagine that this fear would soon become reality. After Colin's admission to the psychiatric hospital, his behavior did not change. He still showed aggression and remained cold toward his mother, but now openly threatened her. When the doctors released him home, they noted that the young man was reluctant to return to Catherine. He explained that if he was forced to live with her, he would either kill himself or her. These statements were included in the official report, but no further action was taken. The police, for their part, were aware of his problems. When he ran away to his grandmother again in February 2024, officers took him into custody and wrote a report in which he repeated the same threat. If he were sent back to his mother, he would kill her. The law enforcement officers noted this, but merely handed him over to social services, and he was back at Catherine's house. At this point, Catherine had already realized that her son was a threat. In conversations with friends, she admitted that she was afraid of him, that he constantly threatened her, and that he was acting increasingly strangely. She repeatedly said that she doubted the self-defense version that Colin had given after his father's death. She reviewed the details of that tragedy and began to realize that he might not have killed Charles because he feared for his life, but because he wanted to get rid of him. Despite her fear, Catherine tried to smooth things over. She hoped that kindness could change her son's behavior. In the spring of 2024, she began buying him expensive gifts, including new devices and clothes, and gave him money for entertainment. In May, when he graduated from school, she gave him a car. She thought that in this way she could win his favor and show that he was important to her. On social media, she posted photos with signed congratulations, expressing joy over her son's achievements. People observing their lives from the outside thought that everything would turn out for the best. In the pictures, they looked like a happy family. They went on vacation, spent time together. But behind these images was a tension that grew ever greater. Catherine tried to tell herself that she was doing her best, but her intuition told her that she was living with a man who could cross the line one day. Soon after, that is exactly what happened. A few days before the tragedy, the relationship between Colin and Catherine heated up again. On September 6, 2024, an argument broke out between the two. Colin again refused to do the housework, and Catherine demanded that he stop ignoring her requests. He didn't like it when someone tried to control him and reacted aggressively. In the middle of the argument, he packed his things and left the house to drive to his grandmother. It was not the first time Colin had run away there, and his grandmother was horrified by his appearance. She knew what he was capable of and was afraid that her intervention in the situation could backfire. When Catherine found out where her son was, she decided that she could no longer let him do what he wanted. On the morning of September 8th, she called her son and told him that she would have to report him to the police and Child Protective Services if he did not come home. Colin ignored her words. In the afternoon, Catherine drove to her mother's house to pick up her son personally. It was about 4 p.m. According to neighbors' testimonies, an argument broke out between the two right in the yard. Several people heard the screams, but only one neighbor witnessed what happened. She saw Colin roughly grab his mother by the hair and drag her into the house. Catherine resisted and begged him to let her go, but he did not respond. The door slammed shut and nothing more could be heard outside. None of the neighbors called the police. The neighbor who saw him violently drag his mother into the house did not dare to intervene. She went into her room, determined to have nothing to do with it. She later admitted that she feared for her safety. 2 hours passed before the emergency call came in. Colin informed the dispatcher that his mother was dead. He spoke in a calm voice and claimed that Catherine had grabbed a knife during an argument and threatened him. At some point, she had stumbled and fallen, ramming the blade into her neck. Colin emphasized that he had tried to help her, but it was too late. When the police arrived at the scene, Colin was already waiting for them outside. His behavior did not fit the situation. He seemed neither agitated nor scared.
This warmth prevents the narrative from sounding cold or sterile. Instead, it provides a sense of reassuring guidance, making the listener trust the storyteller. It should feel like a seasoned journalist or investigator guiding you through complex and unsettling events, maintaining a calm, steady presence that underscores the seriousness and impact of the crime without resorting to melodrama. The speed of the voice should remain the same. The first thing he said to the officers was, "I know my rights. I need a lawyer." He neither tried to explain what had happened nor ask for help for his mother. Inside the house, they found Catherine's body. The picture Colin described was not imaginable in reality. The knife had penetrated too deeply, and the wounds did not match his version. It was clear to the investigators that this was not an accident, but a premeditated crime. After the discovery of Catherine Griffith's body, the investigation team began examining the crime scene. The forensic examiners recorded in detail the position of the objects in the house, the nature of the blood traces, and possible evidence that could confirm or refute Colin's version of the accident. The first thing that struck the forensic team was the complete absence of signs of a struggle. If the version was correct and his mother had really stumbled and fallen on the knife, there should have been signs of chaotic movements at the scene. Scratches on the floor, overturned objects, bloodstains in various places. But none of this was found. Catherine's body was lying flat, the blood was not splashed, and the knife itself had penetrated too deeply, making the version of an accidental fall almost impossible. The pathologist who arrived at the crime scene examined the body and immediately noted several important points. The depth of the blade's penetration indicated significant force. The angle of the wound ruled out the possibility that Catherine could have accidentally fallen on the knife herself. The experts also noticed that the woman had no defensive cuts on her hands, which are typical of attempts to fend off an attack. This meant that she either had no time to recognize the danger or was incapacitated at the time of the blow. The investigators decided to check whether Colin's statement and his emergency call matched. They listened carefully to the recording and noticed an important detail. When the dispatcher asked if the mother needed medical assistance, he did not try to find out if anything could be done to save her. He simply stated that she was dead. Such cold-bloodedness seems suspicious. Next, the investigators examined the traces in the house. It was important to check whether Catherine really held a knife in her hand, as Colin claimed. They analyzed the fingerprints. There were no traces of her fingers on the handle of the knife, only Colin's prints.
This immediately refuted his version that his mother had grabbed the weapon first. Another important aspect was the absence of blood traces in the kitchen, from which Catherine allegedly took the knife, according to Colin. The experts carefully examined the work surfaces, the floor, and the kitchen surfaces. Nothing. If she really was carrying the knife with her and accidentally fell on it, there should have been drops of blood where she moved. One of the investigators compared the details of the current crime with the earlier murder of Charles Griffith. He called up the case files from 2023 and saw a striking similarity. In both cases, Colin immediately called the police, gave dry and smooth explanations, showed no emotions, and immediately demanded a lawyer. Two different crimes, but the same pattern of behavior. The investigators decided to examine Colin's psyche more closely, as his behavior raised serious questions. At their request, they examined his conversations with psychiatrists during his previous hospital stay. It turned out that he had already threatened his mother a year before the crime, explicitly telling the doctors that he would either kill her or end his own life. These words were now de facto a prediction of the act. Furthermore, the investigators examined witness statements. A neighbor saw Colin violently drag his mother into the house. Another heard screams but did not call the police. The eyewitness statements directly refuted Colin's version of the events as an accident. The examination of Colin's cell phone was also an important piece of evidence. Forensic technicians found deleted messages and a series of search queries. In the week leading up to the act, he had searched for information on how to kill someone fastest, how long it takes to bleed to death, and read articles about legal loopholes when accused of a crime. These search queries became a powerful argument for the prosecution, proving that the crime against Catherine was planned.
This warmth prevents the narrative from sounding cold or sterile. Instead, it provides a sense of reassuring guidance, making the listener trust the storyteller. It should feel like a seasoned journalist or investigator guiding you through complex and unsettling events, maintaining a calm, steady presence that underscores the seriousness and impact of the crime without resorting to melodrama. The speed of the voice should remain the same. The investigators also found out that Catherine had told friends 2 days before the tragedy that she feared for her life. She stated that her son would be to blame if something happened to her. This confession was a last warning that no one could take seriously anymore. When all the evidence was collected, the Charlotte County District Attorney's Office charged Colin Griffith with first-degree murder. He was transferred to a detention facility where he awaited his trial. The investigators also began working with the Oklahoma authorities to investigate his father's death. Colin never showed any sign of remorse. He asked no questions, did not inquire about his mother, and showed no sympathy for his fate. The officers who interrogated him came to the same conclusion. They saw an emotionless, cold-blooded man who not only killed, but did so without remorse. Given the circumstances of the crime, the prosecutor's office stated that they would seek the maximum penalty for Colin, life imprisonment without the right to parole. However, the court was confronted with the question of his age. At the time of the crime, Colin was 17 years old, which could affect the proceedings. The prosecution appealed, requesting that Colin be tried as an adult. Under Florida law, such a measure is possible for minors if the offense is exceptionally cruel and poses a danger to the public. The court granted the appeal, and Colin fell under the jurisdiction of adult criminal law, which meant harsher punishment. Colin's lawyers tried to defend themselves by claiming he was mentally unstable and might have acted impulsively. However, the prosecution presented records of his conversations with psychiatrists, which showed that he was not only aware of his actions, but also that he had directly threatened his mother months before the crime. He would either kill her or himself. This fact became one of the main points of the indictment. The prosecution's office also raised questions about his past. In 2023, Colin killed his father, but the case was closed then due to lack of evidence. However, now that it has become clear that he is capable of a crime, law enforcement authorities in Oklahoma have decided to consider reopening the investigation.
The investigators began searching for potential witnesses who could shed light on the events of February 2023. The investigators turned to friends and acquaintances of Charles Griffith, as well as Colin's former teachers and classmates, to find out whether he had previously expressed the intention to harm his father. The Charlotte County District Attorney's Office sent the current case file to Oklahoma, pointing to similar behavior of the accused in both cases. During the investigation, new evidence was found. In the archives of the school Colin attended, a student's statement was found who recalled that Colin had spoken shortly before his father's death about wanting to live without him, and that his death would be the best solution. At the time, no one took this seriously, but now these words were seen in a different light. The Oklahoma prosecutor stated that Charles's case could officially be reopened if further evidence was found. This would require either new witnesses or direct evidence that Colin's version of self-defense was false. Meanwhile, the trial for the manslaughter of Catherine continued. The prosecution insisted on life imprisonment without the possibility of a reduced sentence. The prosecutors emphasized that Colin had shown no remorse, expressed no regret for his actions, and had remained cool-headed since his arrest. As with the first crime, Colin showed no emotion either in the courtroom or during questioning. His behavior was the same as in 2023, when he spoke about his father's death with the same calm as he now spoke about his mother's death. This strengthened the prosecution's argument. The final verdict in the Catherine Griffith case is still pending. However, the greatest tension was whether the investigators in Oklahoma would be able to find evidence to formally charge Colin with the crime against Charles Griffith. If this were the case, Colin could receive an additional sentence and definitively eliminate the slightest chance of being released. Thank you for watching, and take care.
Ava Majerie was born on September 6, 2006 in Manlapan, New Jersey, USA. She grew up in a friendly and quiet family. Her father, Rob Majerie, was a police lieutenant in Jersey at the time, and her mother, Kimberly Majerie, worked as an ultrasound technician. Ava also had two brothers. The older one, John, was born 2 years before her, and the younger one, Logan, 4 years later, which was a pleasant surprise and made Ava very happy. As the only girl in the family, she was loved and protected by all members. She was described as a lively, innocent, and sweet girl. From a young age, Ava showed creativity and initiative. She designed stickers on her laptop. When her classmates in New Jersey learned of her talent, she began selling her work. It was even rumored that she earned $700 from this. When Ava entered her teens, her family had to leave everything familiar and adapt to a new environment. As they decided to move to a warmer climate with a less onerous tax system. In 2019, after Rob retired, the Majerie family moved to Florida. They settled in Neapolis in the southwest of the state, considered one of the best coastal cities for its relaxed lifestyle, beautiful beaches, and safety. Ava and her brother attended the public high school. Ava was also a member of the girls' soccer team. However, in March 2020, the world went into self-isolation due to the COVID-19 virus, and thousands of young people were forced to leave their classrooms and stay home, learning via their phones or computers. Without the ability to connect with friends in person, the young people found a way to overcome their isolation and stay connected to the world through social media. Many of them began recording and posting videos with a variety of content. At that point, Ava downloaded TikTok onto her devices and immersed herself in a new world where funny videos and likes were her path to greater recognition. During her first steps in this hobby, she could be seen in funny videos moving her lips to music, dancing to popular songs, or joking with her brothers who supported her in this pastime. Her natural attractiveness, harmonious face, and funny content attracted more and more attention. At the height of the pandemic, her popularity rose to over 1 million followers, almost 3/4 of whom were men. Ava became part of the so-called likes generation. The more likes she received, the more videos she created, and quickly realized that this hobby could be lucrative. However, her smile, beauty, and charm caught the attention of one special subscriber who left a comment under each of her videos. This was Rohan Justin, a young man born in India but living in the United States. His father, Dominic Justin, was known to work as a software engineer, but information about his mother remained unknown. The Justin family lived in the US for a long time, but after his parents' divorce, Eric returned to India with his father. However, he didn't feel comfortable in India and decided to return to the US in 2015 to live with his mother. Eric was reportedly a good student and particularly strong in mathematics. When Eric discovered Ava on social media, he was 18 years old. He lived in Maryland, 1,500 kilometers from Florida, and attended Mount Hebron High School. However, his infatuation with Ava quickly turned into an obsession. Eric made efforts to make Ava aware of his existence and pay attention to him. He not only commented on all of her videos, but also began following her on other social media platforms and messaging her across various platforms. He also appeared in the online games she played with her brothers. At first, Ava answered him politely, chatted casually with him, and asked him how his day was, just as she would with any other follower. She was used to responding to most of them and maintaining interaction. Her family considered her an innocent girl who was simply enjoying her online popularity. Her parents saw no reason to worry, as at the time, there was no reason to believe this hobby could be dangerous. He discovered that Majerie's family had moved from New Jersey to Florida and contacted her former classmates to gather as much information about them as possible. He offered them money or to do their homework for them in order to gain access to the school account of one of Ava's former classmates. All of these efforts were aimed at obtaining photos, information about the girl's preferences, and eventually her phone number. The 18-year-old began sending her messages and calling her on her cell phone. In one of the conversations, he offered to pay her for selfies. Ava, feeling enterprising, decided to earn money and discussed the offer with her parents, with whom she had a good relationship. After a discussion, her parents agreed, as similar images were already available for free on another platform. Eric paid $300 for 2 pictures of the girl. However, his intentions turned out to be less than innocent. After receiving the first few photos, he demanded more explicit images, particularly intimate photos and pictures of her feet. Ava immediately reacted by blocking him on all platforms. Eric became obsessed with the girl and suffered from intense anxiety and worry, which led to acts of desperation. After being blocked, he sent numerous apologies and then sent a letter containing $500 and a note claiming he was broke and that was all the money he had. At this point, the father sent Eric a text message warning him, demanding that he stop all contact with his daughter. However, Eric became increasingly desperate and sought dark ways to get closer to the girl. In one message, he asked a former classmate of Ava's if he had access to a belt or a gun. In another exchange, he explained his intention to attack the girl and wrote that he could break down the door with a shotgun. It is unclear how Ava learned of these threats. However, she contacted the recipient of the messages to verify their authenticity. The young man, whose name was not disclosed, confirmed receipt of the threats and forwarded her more from Eric's phone number. Fearing for her safety, the girl revealed the obsessive admirer's disturbing plans to her parents. Her parents, Rob and Kimberly, had never encountered such a situation before. They decided to conduct their own investigation into Eric's identity and did not contact the authorities, considering the threats minor. When Rob learned that Eric, who goes by the pseudonym Eric Justin X Online, lives in Ellicott City, Maryland, just a few hundred kilometers from their home, he considered him an internet cowboy who posed no real threat. But on July 10, 2021, at around 4:30 a.m., Eric, who had transformed from fan to stalker, arrived at the Majerie family home armed with a shotgun. He shot a hole in the door and entered. Eric was equipped for the mission. He wore the blue vest of an employee of a major American retail chain, safety goggles and earplugs. Since the family's house was a single-story building, the bedrooms were very close to where the deafening shot had been heard. Ava's bedroom was directly on the other side of the door, so the sound was felt most strongly there. As she later reported, as soon as she heard the shot, she felt a tremor in her chest. As she jumped out of bed, she saw a hole in the door. Instinctively, she ran to her brother's room for protection and hid there. She took a blanket, a bottle of water, and a cell phone. Ava's father, a former police officer, acted on his years of experience and tried to chase Eric away, whose gun jammed at the time. The attacker paused, struggled with the gun, and then fled. Rob pursued him while Kimberly called emergency services to report an attack on their home. During the chase, Rob fell and cut his knee, allowing the intruder to escape. The police officer returned home to retrieve his registered personal firearm and remained at his post by the front door to protect his family while waiting for the police to arrive. To his surprise, Eric reappeared at the Majerie family home before the officers arrived. When Rob saw his attacker returning, he ordered him to drop his gun. But the young man ignored the order and pointed the gun at him. Ava's father then shot the attacker. The Majerie family's 3 children hid in their parents' bedroom at the back of the house. When they realized the attacker was dead, Ava ran out into the hallway in panic and rage. Her older brother John turned on her, accusing her of being responsible for the incident. When police arrived, they discovered the crime scene and began collecting evidence. Eric's body was found in the front yard of the house. An examination of his belongings uncovered 2 cell phones containing photos and hundreds of hours of video footage of Ava. The Collier County Sheriff's Office told local media that a resident of a home in the Raffia gated community in North Florida killed a man after the man shot at the home while attempting a burglary. At the time, police did not release the name of the man killed or provide any further details. However, a police report, which was not released to the media, was more definitive. The man killed was likely an obsessive stalker. In a witness statement from the mother, it was stated that since Ava became active on video and photo platforms, several people had tried to find out her family's address. But Eric came too close to her and threatened her. Kimberly provided all available information about the young man, including his contact details. The police officers later informed Rob that under Florida law he had the right to defend his position with justifiable deadly force. Section 77603 of this law gives people the right to injure or kill in situations of self-defense if there is a fear of serious physical harm. In such cases, they do not have to first retreat or flee. This law protected Rob from prosecution. However, to be sure, Rob contacted attorney James Escarra. This was the only information that Collier County Sheriff Kevin Rums and his office provided about the case. When the media tried to contact them, the response was, "The investigation is still ongoing, there is no news." During the police investigation, it came to light that Eric had sold Ava's phone number to his friends and classmates and asked them to call or text her. Little was known about Eric's family's reaction after the incident. His father, Dominic, described his son as a good guy in a conversation with investigators and made no comment on what had happened. In his grief, he said he was confused by Eric's behavior and did not understand what went wrong or why he made such a bad decision. The reaction of the 18-year-old's mother was also not recorded. What began as a fun internet adventure turned into a nightmare for the Majerie family. After the incident, they were forced to stay with friends. And when they returned to their rented home, the Homeowners Association sent a letter to the owner demanding that he vacate the house. Residents felt unsettled by Ava's social media activity and didn't want to give up their usual peace of mind. Ava didn't tell her followers what had happened, as she didn't want her reputation to suffer and people to think she had drawn attention to herself. To be safe, she had to unsubscribe from all her local friends and Jersey subscribers, for which she immediately received negative reactions and harsh criticism. Some of the critics mocked her, claiming that she considered herself a Hollywood star and therefore no longer wanted to associate with them. At the time, Ava didn't give her friends an explanation. However, in a later interview, she revealed that many of those who condemned her didn't know that at night, as she tried to fall asleep after the horrific incident. All she could think about was no longer wanting to do the things that had made her famous online. This caused her anxiety and inner conflict, as she had done nothing wrong but believed that her content was not immoral. On the contrary, they were beneficial to her and could help her realize her dream of becoming a movie star. And she wasn't wrong. Kimberly soon received an offer from a talent agent who was interested in Ava. The agent invited her to Los Angeles so she could meet influential people and attend a red carpet event. On July 17 of that year, just 7 days after her world was rocked by an obsessive fan, Ava attended the premiere of the Glow show, the launch of Glow of Girls, a new line of fashion dolls. In the show, 6 young people lived in a luxury villa and had to face exciting challenges. According to her mother, this was much needed and enjoyable entertainment for her daughter. However, this incident wasn't the only negative experience related to her popularity. In early August, Ava received a message on a premium cell phone service from a man who called her "my girl" and offered $1,000 for her phone number. This again worried the family, and they immediately contacted law enforcement to investigate the new harassment. The investigation revealed that the name of the sender of the messages matched that of a registered offender who was in prison. The messages to Ava suggested that he had broken the law again. Meanwhile, the events at the Majerie home were being discussed at school. It was revealed that the same man who had received messages from Eric about his intentions to attack Ava continued to attend the same school as her and had become the new stalker. Ava felt he was stalking her and reported this to Rob and Kimberly. The family then decided to file a report with the school and contact the authorities. Afterward, a classmate sent her a video of the same man who was stalking her firing a gun at a shooting range. Because the frequent incidents had a negative impact on Ava's emotional state, her parents, concerned for her safety, expelled her from school, stopped her soccer lessons, and began giving her private lessons. Eventually, James, the family's attorney, filed a petition for a restraining order on the grounds of harassment in Collier County Court. On February 28, Ava took the stand. 7 months later, on February 22, 2022, news of the stalker's attack on the Majerie home and its tragic outcome became widespread. At that time, the family agreed to an interview with the New York Times and spoke for the first time about their horrific experience. The parents explained that by publishing the case, they wanted to raise awareness that internet fame can lead to violence in real life. Despite her experiences, Ava continued to make her social media videos with the support of her parents, who said they did not want sick people forcing their daughter to leave the platforms and give up on her dreams. From Kimberly's perspective, they chose what was best for their family, even though they knew not everyone would understand. Rob felt it was necessary to let her make her own decisions and support her, as this would help her recovery. Creating content and videos had become an integral part of her life, and taking that away from her would have been a huge blow. Ava told the audience that she closes her eyes at night and there's nothing more exciting in the morning than seeing the number of views. Her father compared his daughter's joy to the feeling that every day is like Christmas. For her part, the girl admitted that she realizes many people will oppose her decision and accuse her of profiteering. She explained that her goal was to have an experience, and thanks to her perseverance, she managed to go to Los Angeles. She enjoys making other people happy and seeing the impact her work has on their lives. Currently, Ava continues to work for a major video sharing platform where she earns $1,700 just for her name. Sponsorship deals bring in thousands more. She has 3 accounts on the same social network targeting different audiences. She has also attracted the attention of Hollywood and reality TV producers and received sponsorship offers on other social networks. She has promoted a teeth-whitening product, youth products, and NFL games. Her growth has been so significant that she now has a lawyer specializing in crisis management and public relations. New York-based attorney Michael Marina founded AGM Creations for her. Thank you for watching and take care.